Good evening. My name is Dawn Cartier. I am with CivTech, located in Scottsdale, and we're the traffic engineer assisting Landmark with the project. I think Brian did a great job of explaining many of the traffic issues and resolutions that we've come to date. The primary purpose of my presentation tonight is just to walk through the elements of traffic calming that we're planning on providing. We've been working diligently with the neighborhood and with the city to find traffic calming that's acceptable, both in terms of traffic calming to the neighborhood, but as well as maintenance, operation, providing bike lanes and other elements that the city requires, because they're the ones, the city will ultimately be responsible for operating and maintaining whatever improvements we do put in place long term. So I'm going to start at the intersection of Route 66 and Blackbird. Do you need me to back up at all?
I'm all right.
Okay.
I keep that piece.
No problem. Thank you. So this intersection here of Route 66 and Blackbird Roost. Originally, and that's in ADOT's purview, ADOT's jurisdiction. Originally, when we were working with ADOT, they had asked that we postpone a pedestrian study and pedestrian-related improvements until after the development was fully occupied. The neighborhood strongly wanted something to be put in place prior to the opening of the standard, and the city and ADOT, through many conversations, have agreed that that can now take place. So we will be providing a full-scale pedestrian hybrid beacon study, which is a study that will look at whether or not a warrant will be met after we're in place. We'll be predicting the number of students that would be crossing the streets, along with the existing number crossing the streets. Yeah. And it'll also look at the number of students that we project to be crossing the streets, along with the number of existing residents who already cross the street, to see if a warrant is met. Earlier studies prepared for this evaluation show that that warrant just surpasses threshold. So with an estimate of students crossing that street, the chances of meeting the warrant, exceeding that warrant, even higher, even more likely. With the approval of ADOT, we would be installing a pedestrian hybrid beacon. That location would be determined in the study and would have to be approved by ADOT. We would also be installing some turn restrictions at the intersection, again, to be reviewed and approved by ADOT as part of that study. In addition to that, we're now bonding for an additional $10,000 for a future study, just to ensure that the location and installation of the pedestrian hybrid beacon is correctly placed, and if additional warrants or needs are met, that those will still be addressed. I'm going to work my way up Blackbird Roost. There's been some discussion with the neighborhood about parking restrictions on Blackbird Roost. We are in support of parking restrictions on Blackbird Roost, but that would also require coordination and agreement with neighboring properties. In discussions with the city, they agreed that if those conversations were to show that the neighboring properties also wanted to restrict parking on Blackbird Roost, no parking signs would be placed along the street. Our current plan then proposes a traffic circle at the intersection of Blackbird Roost and Clay Avenue. This will require us to completely rebuild the intersection. The current configuration of the ramps and sidewalks would be reconstructed to meet ADA. There are also some drainage elements that must be considered in that redesign. The design includes splitter islands on the approach to the circle, which could be landscaped. And we are proposing landscaping in the center circle to include signage for La Plaza Vieja neighborhood. The neighborhood brought to our attention that there is a piece of sidewalk missing along Blackbird Roost. It's located on the eastern side. It's about 125 to 150 feet on the approach to Clay Avenue. We will be completing that segment to ensure that there's a safe pedestrian connection. Our plan currently proposes a revision to the existing crosswalk located adjacent to Kingman Avenue. Kingman? The existing crosswalk joins up with curbs and ramps that do not meet ADA. And on the side approaching the school doesn't appear to have a ramp. We will be installing raised median on both sides of Kingman to provide a pedestrian refuge for the crossing. We will be rebuilding all of the ramps, curb returns, and the ramp on the school side to meet ADA, which will allow us to pull that crosswalk to the east a little bit and avoid the existing drainage gate, which it currently runs right into.
Ma'am, you have to have a pointer so you can point
Oh.
where these areas are as you're talking.
Do you have a... So we were just talking about, let me get my... Yeah. I was trying to use this mouse pointer. I'll try to circle bigger to see if it is clearer on the map. But in this case, we're talking about this location right here. In order to provide this improvement, it requires us to shift lanes as a traffic calming feature. And to remove the on-street parking immediately at this location. But allows us to maintain bike lanes. Thanks. It's right here. Continuing to the east, the city provided us with an existing streetlight inventory, and that indicated that the spacing of streetlights along Blackbird Roost and Clay Avenue meet the city's existing standard for light spacing, except at one location, which is located between Malpe and Milton Road. So we will be installing one street light to ensure the city standard is met in that location. It's our understanding that the neighborhood has been requesting a left turn arrow at this location, and the left turn arrow would be for kind of the eastbound to westbound left turn. And ADOT has looked at this location on previous occasions, and it has not met the warrant for the installation of the signal. But we are in support of the neighborhood with that request. And we're prepared to complete a study after the opening of the standard to see if that is met with the change in traffic patterns once the standard is open and operating. Last, we've had several conversations about the installation of street trees. Street trees? Street trees. Trees. Along Blackbird Roost and Clay Avenue. We're able to achieve that right now in the locations where we're providing improvements. But the existing right-of-way along Blackbird and Clay prevent the installation of more trees. Blackbird. Now, should the neighborhood wish to organize the property owners with frontage on Clay Avenue and Blackbird and get their agreement to provide easements for this improvement, we would come in and provide the surveying required to write the easements and obtain the easements with the city. And then we would complete the improvements with street trees and irrigation.
Where is this area? So you show all that?
It's along Clay and along Blackbird. I'm happy to answer any other traffic questions you might have about the project.
Commissioner Moore?
I think at Blackbird and Clay, you said proposed a traffic circle. Is that the same as a roundabout?
That is correct.
And can you tell me what a pedestrian hybrid beacon is?
A pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is what we've proposed at the intersection of Route 66 and Metz Blackbird, is a pedestrian actuated traffic signal that would stop traffic so that pedestrians could freely cross the street. You're welcome.
Any other questions at this time?
Quick question. What are your peak hour traffic increases going to be on from Blackbird Roost to Clay Avenue and Route 66 to Milton?
During the peak hours of the street, which was what was evaluated, I'd have to look at that study real quick to get the answer for you, and I'll do that. But I believe along Blackbird and Clay, we were increasing Let me look at that real quick.
No.
So in the AM peak hour, we would be increasing the trips on both Blackbird and Clay. Trips, vehicle trips, cars, driving trips. By about 75 cars per hour. In the afternoon, in the PM peak hour, we're increasing the trips along Blackbird and Clay by about 140 cars per hour.
Quiet, please.
And I'm just looking for your existing counts right now to give you what it is today. Existing traffic counts. So starting at the beginning. So in the, kind of going back to my, so it looks like in the existing condition, we would be increasing traffic along Blackbird and Clay anywhere between 40% to 60%.
And what about Route 66 to Milton?
Oh, okay, so Route 66, the increase is much smaller. The numbers are the same. The study assumed an even split of trips along Blackbird and Clay, and then trips along Route 66. We believe a majority of those trips that use Route 66 will head to the west and find their way to University, which gives them a direct signal straight into campus.
Quiet, please.
But the traffic volumes on Route 66 are also much greater. So our percentage difference there is single-digit percentage.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Turner?
Well, what is the current level of service on Blackbird pre and post?
So the existing level of service, let me peek back in here. Sorry about that. So the existing level of service along the actual roadway and street segments themselves, they operate very high, very well. Level of service A and B respectively along Clay and along Blackbird.
So what is the current level of service today versus the post occupancy, full occupancy level of service for those two?
Sure. It's the intersections where we see the impact. The roads themselves are built to a minor collector street standard, which is intended to handle traffic. And so our increase of traffic volumes in the way that we would rate an intersection from a level of service A to F, or a level of service of a roadway, A to F, A being the worst, or A being the best and F being the worst. F is the worst. The addition of our cars impacts that capacity in a very minor condition. So while it's an increase in the percentage of cars on the street, in terms of measurable level of service of the roadway segments, there's not much difference. It's at the intersections that we really start to see. Oh, sorry.
Could you just repeat that part about your last sentence before?
Sure. So the roadway segments, we don't necessarily see a discernible difference, a real difference in the level of service. It's at the intersections, and at those intersections in our evaluation, the levels of service I think at one of the intersections did change. So if we degraded, we were still at the city's minimum standard for level of service, which is a D or better, and I don't believe we had any Ds. The intersections where traffic movements today have lower levels of service are the intersections of Clay Avenue with Milton Road and the intersection of Blackbird and Route 66. So the evaluation of the intersections within the neighborhood. So for example, Metz and Blackbird. Metz and Blackbird, which is Route 66, didn't perform well because of our left turn movements, which we believe the study, the study showed a left turn movement here that we believe will really use the cut-through route on Riordan to get to University and head into town. The intersection of Blackbird, Roost, and Clay in the background condition, which is without us, operates at an A. And so, for example, with us continues to operate as an A.
Any further questions? Commissioner Carpenter.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to let you know that I have a number of questions related to traffic. I think I'll wait until we're deliberating, and as long as the engineer stays later, that way there's more time for public participation.
I will stay.
Okay, thank you. So I think before we head into a public hearing, we'll take a quick break. 5 minutes.
I'll second that.